So I got a lot of questions about shooting a mouth tab bow, and I figured I'd take a little bit of time to go over what it takes to shoot a mouth tab and why you might want to shoot a mouth tab bow. So what a mouth tab is essentially you're biting onto a tab and then drawing the bow back with your mouth. What this allows you to do is operate a bow with one hand. So this is really good if you have some kind of injury that prevents you from being able to use both hands. So the mouth tab will allow you to still shoot a bow or regular bow, but you're just doing it a little bit different. You're drawing and shooting using your mouth instead of your hand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over a little bit of the setup of a mouth tab, what it takes to get started, and then some of the things that I learned along the way. I did a lot of trial and error through this process. I wanted to find the most accurate way for me. Just like any bow setup, a lot of these things are going to be personal preference, so I'll tell you a lot of the other options, and then I'll go over my personal setup as well. So let's dive into the initial bow setup when it comes to a mouth tab. You're going to probably need to lighten the poundage of your bow just to get started. You're also going to decrease your draw length, and you're going to have to drop your peep down because now you're anchoring a lot higher. So the peep is going to move a lot closer to your mouth. That way you can see your sight through the peep. Then in correlation to that, you'll probably have to change your arrow setup. You'll have to either go with a different spine or a lighter arrow because you're decreasing the draw length and you're also decreasing the pounding. So I just kept my normal Matthews V3X for setting up the mouth tab. And then I just changed the mods out to a 55-pound mod. And I also backed out the limb bolts a little bit. Make sure that if you're backing out your limb bolts, you're only doing what the factory recommends because you don't want to get to the end and then essentially undo the bow. So whatever will work with your bow, that's all just bow dependent. So now let's look at what a mouth tab is. So a mouth tab is something that you can bite down on. The material can depend. So some people use leather, other people use paracord, or some kind of what people might call a dog collar, cat collar, or some kind of webbing material. What the tab's made out of is really just personal preference, but there's a few things to consider when it comes to a mouth tab. When I first started this process, like, where do I get a mouth tab? And I didn't realize that almost all the mouth tabs are made. You can't actually just go find one to buy, which is unfortunate because it'd be a lot easier to get into the setup if you could. I toyed around with a lot of different options. I started off with leather because my buddy that got me into it, Nolan Young, he shoots a leather tab. So a leather tab can be good because it's a little bit softer on your mouth, not any sharp edges or things that can catch your cheek or cut you. That's weird. Now another plus side to leather is the more you use it, it starts to leave grooves where your teeth indent. So that leaves kind of an index for your bite. When you think about a bow, consistency is key. So if you're drawing with your hand, a consistent anchor point is absolutely necessary. When you're biting down, you need a consistent anchor point as well. So the grooves in the tab help you put your teeth in the right place. Now some downsides to the leather, it's a little bit heavier. After you shoot, everything's moving forward. So that leather tab comes forward, it hits things, it gets your peep sight and everything a little bit off center. So if you were to make a quick follow-up shot, that's something to think about. It's also a lot slower for the bowstring and a lot noisier. One of the other things that I didn't like about it, or the reason I switched from leather, was primarily because the chemicals used in the leather treatment gave me a lot of sores in my mouth, and the tab wore out a lot faster than some of the other ones. When I tried the paracord tab, I felt like there wasn't enough bite surface for me when I was shooting heavier poundages required for hunting. Now the cat collar tab or small dog collar tab, I tried that and it was a little bit heavier. It's a thicker piece of nylon or polypropylene. It does last a lot longer. However, I found that I had some of the same problems that I did with the leather, where it would swing forward, hit the bow, make a lot of noise, and slow the bowstring down. I ended up designing my own tab where I used 3/4 inch strap. I think it's either nylon or poly, whatever's a little bit stronger. It's pretty flexible. So then I folded it over to sew a place where the D-loop would go through, and then I closed it upon itself and then sewed that down so I would have a smaller bite area, as well as I never had to turn it or look down. It was always facing the way that I would bite. I hadn't actually seen anybody doing this style yet, but I felt like this way, especially for hunting, was extremely beneficial. I also found that I gained a lot of speed out of my bow because the tab was a little lighter and it was a lot quieter. One thing you're gonna notice is if you're using some kind of synthetic material, you have to burn the ends. You want to make sure that you burn it and crimp it down so it doesn't catch in your mouth. That's probably the only thing I would say. Anything that you have to burn the ends on causes something to catch, but frayed string could get caught in between your teeth and cause problems as well. When it comes to the tab itself, I actually tied it into my standard D-loop, but I put indicators above and below the knock because one thing about a mouth tab is they wear out extremely fast. The bite force, as well as it running along your teeth, wears pretty much every tab down, no matter what they're made out of. So you're gonna have to replace your D-loop often. So I made sure to put a little bit of an indicator above and below my arrow. So when I change the tab out, it's pretty much right on from where it was last time. In order to find your draw length, one thing that I did, which I would suggest, is go to a bow shop, grab like a Matthews Genesis bow that can be turned down really light, put a tab on, and then draw that bow back. It's really good to get that initial draw on a really light bow so you go, okay, I know I can do this, and I can easily find my new draw length based off of that. When it comes to shooting a mouth tab, you might actually be surprised, especially if you shot a bow your whole life, at how quickly you can adapt and adjust. You can gain a lot of strength fairly quickly, but you just got to put in the repetitions just like shooting a bow. When it comes to the draw and shot process, there's a couple things you need to consider. With the mouth tab, it's actually really hard to make any slight adjustments. So I think about shooting this mouth tab similar to I would shooting an unfletched arrow. It tells you your mistakes right away. Making a bad grip will show a substantial miss toward the target compared to shooting with both hands. Another thing that would be like your stance or your body position, any torque you're putting on the bow, everything is multiplied. So one thing you want to do when you're getting started is you're going to want to make sure you have your bite indexed so you're biting it at the same place every time. On my tab, where it's folded over, I use that folded over portion in the corner of my mouth as an indicator and then try to line it up on my teeth the same every time. Then I'm going to set my grip and push out for the draw. To draw, you're essentially, instead of pulling back, you're just pushing out. You want to commit to that even if it feels really hard, because you don't want it to come back at your face. Remember that the knock from the arrow is just behind here, so you don't want any force coming back. You're gonna want to keep all that force going forward. So what you're doing with a mouth tab is you're replacing your drawing hand with your mouth. So whatever side of the body you'd be drawing with that hand is the side of your mouth that you're gonna be shooting from. What you wanna do is you wanna lay the mouth tab across your molars on the side that you're shooting, below the eye that you're gonna be looking through the peep. You don't want to bite it straight on from your front teeth because you don't want the tab to catch anything where it can fling those teeth downrange as well. Once you're at full draw, this is where you're going to line your peep up with your sight housing. I actually am going to suggest a round sight housing so you can make a concentric circle with your peep. Because you have fewer anchor points, it seems to kind of float in there. One thing that you'll notice is you can move your head up and down to really center that peep sight and the sight housing together. Then I just go through the same shot process that I do with a normal bow. I make sure my bow is leveled, I focus on the target, then I release. Now let's talk about the release for a second. When you're shooting a mouth tab, a release is not actually opening your mouth. As much as that seems like, okay, yeah, you're opening your mouth. But if I just open my mouth like I'm talking, what I get is erratic arrow flight. You need to make sure that that release is the same every time. Instead, you want to only drop your bottom jaw. And this is the hardest thing to really train yourself to do, but once you learn to just drop your bottom jaw, it keeps everything steady and a consistent release. I noticed that my grouping got way better once I really practiced dropping my bottom jaw. One of the things that I didn't think about when I first started shooting is how do you let down as opposed to just shooting? And one of the things that I learned was the easiest way to let down is you slowly move your neck forward to let some of the tension off and then move your hand in at the same time. Something that really helped me for shooting a mouth tab, I just created a shot trainer with a piece of paracord and a tab on it. That way, I didn't have to come to full draw to practice that perfect release. So I could practice that perfect release without tension under it. That's essentially my rundown for setting up a mouth tab. I really encourage you, if you're in a position where this would work for you, give it a try, let me know, drop some comments. Let's share our ideas and our experiences. Catch you guys later.